Hi, I'm State Senator Jim Welch, and welcome to Common Talk about the Commonwealth. Thanks for tuning in, and we're very lucky today to have our guest, Dr. Rob Robinson, who is the Clinical Director of Family Care for Counseling Associates of Wilbraham.
Right.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Senator. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's today we're going to talk a little bit about a topic I think that we've all been familiar with, but
Absolutely, unfortunately, right?
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
in certain areas, but I think also it's great to talk about to just get a refresher course and really
Exactly.
understand what the issue is, and that's the issue of bullying. You know, in schools and towns and whatnot. And obviously you're an expert in that field and have dealt with that for many years. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to you just to talk about a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are.
Well, I actually started many years ago, now probably like 37 years ago, by myself over at Family Care Medical Center in Springfield. And, you know, started seeing people and working with people. And, you know, one thing led to another, and your caseload begins to build, and you start referring out. And I said, you know, maybe it might be nice to add some additional people. And, you know, so over the course of these many years, we now have a group of associated people in Wilbraham where we treat a wide variety of mental health conditions, along with a medical doctor that helps with the management of any medication or medication evaluation. So we really have you know, a fairly significantly busy practice, you know, working with all kinds of situations and family situations and couples and kids and adults. So that's kind of how that's kind of a nutshell about how it grew and how it got there.
Right. Well, you know, today we're going to focus a little bit about bullying. It's getting towards the time of back to school, so
That's
I
right.
think this is a subject that most families want to be in, you know, understanding of what bullying is, you know, what the scenarios are, and just you know, for families to really get an understanding of of what it is. And you know, we have a commonly referred to definition here, and I'll read it. And bullying: to use superior strength or influence to intimidate someone, typically to force him or her to do what one wants. Some synonyms are persecute, oppress, tyrannize, harass, or dominate. Is that a
I think that certainly gets to the probably the more powerful gist of what that is. I think I would also maybe expand that to a degree to include that, you know, sometimes there are more subtle forms of bullying which might not be intended to get someone to do necessarily what you want them to do, but where it's designed really to hurt someone, really just to, and it can be active or it can be passive, really. You know, sometimes nothing has to be said in the form of bullying, where maybe someone would come to sit at a table and then a group of people might get up and leave the table without saying a word. But the message is very clear that you're not wanted. And those kinds of things really do resonate deeply, you know, with young people, you know, where, you know, socially they're trying to get their act together, or, you know, trying to identify who they are. And when that kind of stuff happens, it might not be that we're just trying to coerce you or force you to do something, but just to create a feeling, you know, just to make you feel intimidated or make you feel as if you don't belong, make you feel you're different. Any one of those things can be deeply hurtful and impactful to a young person.
And in today's day and age, of course, you know, we've read statistics that say 77% of students are bullied mentally, verbally, and physically, with cyberbullying rapidly approaching similar numbers. Is that something you deal with or see?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds accurate. I mean, the data that I looked at just prior to coming over to do the show with you, that's about right. I mean, that's a high percentage of people. And of course, they know that includes all types of bullying. And it is correct to say that cyberbullying has become probably one of the more common forms of bullying, where in various forms of social media, you know, people are intimidated or harassed or made to feel badly. So yeah, and there really are many kinds of bullying. I mean, you know, and girls and guys kind of differ somewhat. You know, if you've ever seen the movie, I'm sure young people have, the movie Mean Girls. Girls tend to be a little bit more how would you call it, more of an emotional intimidation, where guys tend, as a rule, to be more physically intimidating. But they cross over that way, but there's differences in that regard.
So for people watching at home and trying to understand what bullying is, obviously, if you have your own children, you try to be aware of what's happening in their lives.
Yes.
If a family is feeling, or they have a child who they feel is being bullied, what are options for them to take?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think first of all, one of the things that I think needs to be said, and I think that's important, is most often the common thing, the normal thing, which doesn't mean healthy, unfortunately, it just means common, is for kids, young people, not to report something. Usually that has to do with the fact, there's two things that really underlie that. One is because they feel if they say something, it's going to get worse. That if they call someone out, if they blow someone in, if they, tell on someone, that they feel then that the intimidation is going to get more severe. So that's a deterrent right there. The other thing is that oftentimes the other comment from young people is that nothing's going to happen. Right? Nothing's going to happen if I say anything. And unfortunately, in some places, that can be true. So I think, the main piece I think that parents need to impart on their kids is that there is always action that they can take, always. And the healthiest thing is always to let somebody know. Let someone know what's happening. Report what you're feeling, what it is that exactly what's going on, what you need, and then to get people on board to try to provide the support that they need to help them.
And I would imagine for many families, maybe dealing with their own child, they notice a change in their child, or maybe, not the changes of going through age, but they can tell something's happening. But, maybe with their own conversations with their child, they can't get either an honest or accurate assessment.
Right.
What should a family do? Reach out to the school? Reach out to?
Well, I mean, it's a great. Another good question. I mean, I think that I can recall many cases. I remember one case in particular. This goes back a number of years, where the parents, their son in this case wasn't saying anything to them, but the mother noticed that there were these contusions and just bruises on various parts of the kid's body. And so she asked him, what's going on? He was reluctant to say anything. And he ended up saying to his pediatrician, because they took him to the doctor concerned about what the bruising was, and they found out that someone in school was poking a finger hard into their body in various places and was causing these contusions. But I think the main thing is, when a son or daughter reports that to a parent, I think the parent needs to be decisive in being able to communicate that with people in the schools so that they're on board, and some kind of action can be taken at that point.
Now, what if you're an adult and you're maybe not directly associated with the situation, but maybe you see something happening? I mean, what should you do as an adult? Should you report it to the school? Report it to? I mean, is there a? I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, the solution to this, I think, really has to do with feeling that people can be empowered to feel that something's going to be done. So, and it's true. It's kind of a social. It's an interesting study in social psychology about sometimes people witnessing things that are happening,
right, but they don't think it's their business.
Either walking by or not saying anything. But when you're working with young kids, and because of the impact that this has on their psychological development, it's really important to share something, to go in and say, look, this is what I witnessed. I need to let you know so something can be done. That's always the right answer, always.
Now, are there certain characteristics that might, I guess, allow a child to fall into a certain category as maybe someone who might be prone to bullying or being a bully, or being bullied? Or is there certain characteristics that families should
Yeah,
look
I mean,
for?
typically there are. I mean, kids, people who are targets. I mean, I guess it's the survival of the fittest mentality, I guess, at the base of a lot of this. I mean, some kids, obviously, when you're talking about middle school and high school age students, there's a wide variety of social, emotional, and physical development. I mean, there's, it runs the gamut. So you're gonna find some kids that are, physically more intimidating, while others are, not quite as physically intimidating. And you have people who, have the lingo down and they're kind of the hip from an emotionally psychological standpoint, and other kids who haven't come to that point yet. And normally it's, in these gaps that you see bullying take place. They'll pick on kids that either tend to be different, some kids that tend to be, maybe perceived as weaker in some respects physically, some kids that are, just basically alone, kids that might be not connected to other groups or other friends. So there's those kids typically make up the targets, but not always. That's the higher percentage. But you find kids who are athletes, for example, and may be great athletes and may be great students, and then other people may be jealous of the strengths that this person has. So even in that case, they can be subjected to forms of bullying or relationship aggression.
So really, it can happen to anybody at any time, and it's just something you have to be aware of.
No question. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So in a minute or so, we're going to be taking a break for some
Sure.
public service announcements, but you mentioned inclusion or exclusion or kind of reference that. Is that what a lot of the forms of bullying you're seeing these days?
I think you do see that. I mean, and that can certainly fall under many headings. It could be how people identify. It could be how people, even how connected they are from a social standpoint. Sometimes if you have kids that, just aren't as well socially developed, I mean, might sit by themselves at tables or just kind of operate by themselves. And unfortunately, they, constitute the higher percentage of targeting that goes on. But it can be, any group that might be different than the norm group, and that creates problems, and they're usually the targets.
Well, it's a very interesting discussion, and I, can't wait to get back to it after the public service announcement, and we'll get it a little bit further into detail. But thanks for joining us thus far. And
Great to be here. Thank you for
We'll be back
inviting
in
me.
a few moments.
They said I have troll teeth.
That my voice sounded like a possessed baby doll.
That no one would ever love someone as stupid as me.
That I was fat, ugly.
Disgusting.
The effect of bullying is potent.
We will no longer be the silent majority.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
We're gonna take action with the I.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness, and so are you.
We just finished dinner and it was time for homework. He hates homework.
It makes no sense.
I don't know how he finds anything in his
I
backpack.
can't find my backpack.
I couldn't even read his handwriting.
Holding the pencil makes my hand hurt.
I know he's bright.
Why is it so hard for me?
He's
I'm
just gotta
trying as
try a
hard
little
as
harder.
I can.
When you can see learning and attention issues from their side, you can be on their side. Go to understood.org, a free online resource with support and tools to help your child thrive.
Hi, welcome back to Common Talk about the Commonwealth. I'm State Senator Jim Welch, and we're having a great conversation with Dr. Rob Robinson about the subject of bullying in schools, bullying in social settings. And we had a great conversation on the first half of the show, and we were talking a little bit about off camera about what can kids do themselves,
Right.
To help the situation. And obviously that kids are kids and they need help and they need direction, but are there certain tactics that parents can help give their kids to deal with bullying situations?
Yeah, and that's, again, a great question. I think that, probably at the crux of supporting kids is the belief that, that they can do something, empowering them to feel that they can do something, and, and hoping that, second to that, when they do, that things can happen. But I'll tell you, probably one of the most important things that I've tried to do in working with kids that have been subjected to bullying or relational aggression in schools is really to try to give them a map, if you will, that contains maybe the 4 or 5 things or 3 or 4 things that they can absolutely do in response to bullying. And, or just even, teasing, a relationship aggression in any form. But, normally, one of the first things I try to have kids do is say, look the first thing you can try to do, in the early beginning stages of something is just make a choice to ignore it. Just ignore it. See if that works. Sometimes if you act as if it's not bothering you in the very early stages, that sometimes, in some cases, is enough to get people to stop because they see it's not having an impact. However, if it continues or intensifies, because every kid has a right to go to school and feel safe. But if it intensifies or continues, I think the next step is to say directly to the person who's doing it, knock it off. Stop it. Really. I don't want you doing that to me any longer. Not an easy thing for a kid to do, but that's the second step. The third level of intervention for a child or a kid is to, if they've said stop and they're still not stopping, the next level would be, look if you don't stop it, then I'm going to let somebody know about this. So you need to knock it off, or I'm going to let someone know, whether it's a teacher or a guidance counselor or a coach or assistant principal, parent, doesn't matter, right? And at that level, once you said that, then it's important to feel to have the kid be empowered to go and let someone know if it continues beyond that point. And always, always let your parents know. If you let a coach know, you let a teacher know, you let a guidance counselor know, administrator know, always let your parents know that this is happening as well, so that they're on board and everybody can, take a role in getting this to stop. But what I like to, when I give these kids this little map of things that they can do, I mean, part of it is, yes, there's this, these are steps you can take, but also giving them the feeling that something can be done. Because I think like we talked about earlier, the worst case scenario would be a child or a student going to school, experiencing this, and then enduring it and not saying anything to anybody about it, or saying something to someone and then having it intensify and then nothing happening. That probably would lead to the higher risk situations that you might see, where a kid just basically feels an absence of any support, nowhere to turn, and the level of desperation, intensifies dramatically at that point.
And, to your point, it would almost give a permission slip to the person who is doing the bullying, because,
no question.
It's gone unchecked. It's gone reported, but unchecked.
Nope, there's no question about it. The other thing too, just a few other things that I think are important for kids to be aware of, and parents to kind of tell their kids this. But one is, to the extent that you can, avoid confrontation. You don't necessarily want to go looking for trouble. Right. So it's in the early stages, it's best to avoid confrontation. In the form of we always have to say that if someone is being, assaulted, you have a right to defend yourself, obviously. But, avoiding confrontation and not teasing other people is a helpful piece, because that can turn on you. And I think too that, to the extent that kids can, and not every kid can do this, and that's what leads to some of the risk factor, but to try to stay connected to people as much as they can, even if they're not necessarily friends with someone, and they can find a space at a table to sit at, or at least hang on the periphery of other kids, or maybe have an acquaintance, maybe not a friend, but someone who you can kind of be with. Connection seems to be an inoculating factor against some of this. So that can help.
And that's may seem like a small thing, but in that child's life might be a really big thing, to be able to have a friend that they sit with. And
right. No, you're absolutely right.
Exclusion is not.
There's no question. And that's something too that when you look at the social matrix, or you look at some of the dynamic that happens socially in schools. There are always students, unfortunately, children that end up isolated for one reason or another. It's always not always the same reason, but to the extent, and I realize, you know, certainly schools and teachers and administrators have their hands full with so many different kinds of things that they have to deal with during a day. But, you know, being on the lookout for the lone child, you know, someone who kind of just operates independently, and taking whatever steps might be able to be taken to help them connect with someone, you know, really can make a huge difference. Even if it's someone to sit with during lunch, right, or someone to be outside with during recess, that connection can really be powerful. And people, you know, and sometimes, you know, there's so many other, you know, more active things that you're contending with that you don't look for those passive problems, but that's a problem, you know, for many, many kids. And I think too, real quickly, I just want to say this, you know, the other thing too is every human being has strengths, everyone. There's an interesting thing on, there's a website. It's been up for a number of years. It was put together by this guy named Martin Seligman, who did all kinds of research on optimism and happiness and psychology. He's actually quite famous in our realm. But he has a website called AuthenticHappiness.org. And there's a survey there that anyone can take, kids as well, that will, at the end of it, you're not going to get a printout of what's wrong with you, but you're going to get a printout of your strengths. And you want to have every human being know what their strengths are, so that in spite of maybe what they get from messaging from relationship aggression in school or bullying, they know internally they have these strengths. And that empowers kids. It makes them feel less susceptible to that kind of thing when you know that you have your own set of strengths. And that can help.
Now, oftentimes, and I think as a society, we've, you know, evolved in really understanding what bullying is and kind of the dangers of bullying. Oftentimes you hear stories, oh, the kids will sort it out themselves, or, you know, I think maybe my father's generation and maybe my generation even, you know, you were told, oh, you know, you confront the bully and you deal with it, and that's the way, you know, you deal with it. Is that good advice these days?
Well, you know, I mean, certainly that's a tactic, you know. I'm not going to say that it isn't. I mean, certainly if someone messes with you and they realize that that was a mistake because they, you know, are trained in maybe martial arts or something, or, you know, they really can aggressively speak up for themselves. Yeah, I think it's important that, you know, if you're being physically assaulted, that you take action of some sort if your life is in danger. Certainly that's a step. But, you know, I think, you know, like we talked about in the first segment, you know, the types of bullying have changed. You know, so when you get cyberbullying or bullying that takes place in social media realms, you know, it's a little different.
Seems like the bullying these days is more about social inclusion and exclusion.
No question. And you know, it happens a great deal. I mean, people will actually post things against other people, and kids witness this and see it, and, you know, I mean, they spend so much time connected to devices and social media that, you know, and a lot of people have access to that. So in some respects, that's more insidious because, it, you know, whatever physical intimidation you might use to have someone stop, that's not necessarily available to you in the world of cyberspace.
So we have a couple minutes left, and, you know, I'd just love to do kind of a recap of kind of what we talked about and maybe steps of you know, best practices, so to speak. So,
absolutely.
So if you suspect your child is being bullied, or you notice a change, the first step would be to, obviously, as a parent, have a conversation with your child about it.
No question. No question.
And then if you do find out if your child is you know, able to express that what is going on, say it's a school setting, the parent should, you know, go and report it to the school if they feel it's appropriate?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think, you know, that's a good point and a good way to finish. I mean, I think the most important thing parents can do is acknowledge and validate their child's concern, right? Acknowledge and validate that. Take it seriously. And then map out a plan. Okay, what are we going to do about this? You know, what do you feel it needs to be done? And if the child really feels terribly intimidated, I think it's absolutely critical that they go down and meet with the administration, and hopefully the school will have a policy that not only in writing is clear about what steps are taken, but that the action in the school supports what's written.
Right.
And I think if you have that consistency, you know, the parents have a, look at, anytime you're feeling you're in trouble, anytime you feel you're being intimidated, anytime you feel like you're not safe, you let us know. We love you, we care about you, we take it seriously. School, a similar kind of policy. Look at, we take this seriously. If you feel you're a victim of this in some respects, let us know. We will do something. And there has to be, you know, action that really is visible and effective. And then in that regard, it really is the most effective thing that can be done.
Right.
And it puts it lowers the risk of the child and makes the person feel empowered that something's happening.
Right. And you know, with about a minute left, it's, you know, obviously I think we could probably talk for hours about
Right.
this issue because it is so prevalent and it's
Right.
something I think we all need to be aware of. And you know, as we get back to school time, I think it's a good refresher course for parents and school administrators and really adults that are just involved with children.
No
right?
question about it. No question.
And
Good
I
point.
think, you know, you hear it on TV all the time, but if you see something, say something
That's
is a good
absolutely,
rule.
that's the case.
So,
Good point.
well, Dr. Rob Robinson, thanks for coming on. I know it's a kind of a difficult subject, but one that you're very well skilled
Senator
in.
Welch,
and
thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity and glad you're doing stuff like this to help people. It's great.
Thank you very much. And thanks for watching Common Talk about the Commonwealth, and we'll see you next time.